Slava Isusu Christu. Today in the Gospel of Matthew, we turn to the first of a series of parables. The parables, of course, are stories that are meant to teach us something. And this one is entitled The Parable of the Wicked Tenants, although my preference is to call it Murder with Intent. I think Agatha Christie would appreciate that. Here we have a parable which is a classic, and it's about leadership in Israel. It's told in the form of an allegory. The context comes from the Song of the Vineyard found in the book of Isaiah, chapter 5, perhaps based on a song of the grape harvest in ancient times. Of course, this is not the only time the vineyard is mentioned in Matthew or other Gospels, so it is quite an important theme. Let me give you a little extract from the Song of the Harvest. It goes like this. Let me sing for my beloved, his song for his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it over, cleared it of stones, and planted it with choice grapes. In the middle he built a watchtower. He hewed a press there too. He waited for it to yield fine grapes, but rotting grapes was all it yielded, and so it goes on. It concludes with this. Now the vineyard of the Lord Sabaoth is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah the plant he cherished. The allegorical allusions, of course, refer to the post-Easter time of the church. The vineyard is in fact Israel. The landowner is God. The tenants are the Jewish leadership. The slaves sent to collect the produce are the prophets of Israel. The son whom the tenants kill is obviously Jesus, who died outside of Jerusalem. The parable is, of course, rooted in Jesus' discussion with the temple establishment. It has relevance, of course, for all people, but its relevance for those in leadership positions in the church, in society, in Israel, is prominent. Does this parable teach that God has rejected Israel by giving the kingdom away to the Gentiles? God is not an Indian giver. The parable is one of judgment directed against the temple leaders. This polemic points to Jesus as the author of this parable. That is authentic. The others to whom the vineyard will be given is not made specific here. Today's leaders are included in this judgment. But we should not read the parable as if Israel will be replaced by the Gentiles or indeed the church. This is known as supersessionism. In 1947, a conference was held in Seelisberg in Switzerland to deal with the implications of the Shoah for Christians after World War II. An address to the churches was written, and it began, "We have recently witnessed an outburst of anti-Semitism which has led to the persecution and extermination of millions of Jews. 10 points were then proposed. The 10th point says this: avoid speaking of the Jews as if the first members of the church had not been Jews. They were Jews, all of them. Peter, Paul, the apostles. This parable tells of dissension between people who are Jewish. Probably the best-known English language book about parables is entitled Stories with Intent. To the question, whose intent? In this case, we must say it was Jesus. It was his intent to expose the temple leaders of his day. There is Christological significance here, and it is a foundational text for thinking about the mission and identity of Jesus. More than a prophet, he is in an intimate relationship with God, and our reaction to him determines involvement in God's kingdom. And of course, the stone quotation, the cornerstone at the end, underscores the theme of rejection and vindication. Jesus is utterly important in God's eternal building. There is also a warning here for us. The tendency to disparage people or events as insignificant needs to be countered. God has come and done something unexpected. Let us not think that the great leaders of our church have not had cause to think about this. Let me conclude with a sentence that St. John Paul II wrote in 1997 at a meeting to deal with anti-Jewish feeling among Christians. He said this: "This people, the Jewish people, has been called and led by God, creator of heaven and earth. Their existence then is not a mere natural or cultural happening. It is a supernatural one. This people continues, in spite of everything, to be the people of the covenant. And despite human infidelity, the Lord is faithful to his covenant." May we share in that fidelity also in our dealings with Jewish people and indeed with fellow Christians. Slava Isusu Christu.